Well, I think our talk this week has had a great effect on me. Our talk is entitled Balance, and I noticed a lot of great ideas for balance within Donna and Sandy's talks this morning and sharings. So in Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes talks about poise. And I looked it up. That is an archaic word originally. And so I'm not surprised he used it because he was raised with the Bible. And the Bible, as I will tell you later, talks about the word poise. And Ernest Holmes defines it as mental balance. He says poise is that perfect balance which maintains everything in its proper place without effort. Balance in our lives without effort. It is the law of equilibrium without which nothing could be maintained. It is the law of balance that must exist in the infinite mind, since there is absolutely nothing to disturb it. Poise, or balance, is the law back of what we term the law of compensation. It is life perfectly balancing itself. Self-existent life alone could produce complete poise. Although we may not be able to understand the full meaning of poise as it exists in spirit, we can understand that it means an eternal power which is unruffled by conflicting emotions, which sometimes we may be. It is always sure of itself. It is unhurried, which we also may not embody those in every given moment. And perfect spirit is also certain. The activity of the mind may be so perfectly adjusted to perfectly poised that it will give the impression of suspended motion. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that suspended motion later.
I'm going to talk about motion. She'll talk about suspended motion, but I'll talk about motion. Everybody knows the universe is constantly in motion. If you've been sitting here just listening and paying attention, or maybe you haven't been paying attention, you would have noticed the air conditioner humming. You might have heard traffic things going on around us. The world around us is constantly in motion. Everything around us, everything within us is moving and alive. Generally speaking, you used to believe that if something was alive, it must be moving, but then I realized, well, there's life in inanimate, or appear to be inanimate objects as well, because everything's made up of atomic energy. Albert Einstein says, everything in life is vibration. He says atoms are in a constant state of motion, and depending on the speed of these atoms, things appear as a solid, liquid, or gas. Sound is also a vibration, and so are thoughts. A new thought from Albert Einstein. Well, Ernest Holmes, Albert Einstein. Vibrations, whether wind, water, or any other substance in the universe or in nature, are mechanisms of balance. I think this is a pretty fascinating concept, and I've thought about it quite a bit, and hope I can explain it to you. For example, if the prong of a tuning fork vibrates in the air, the layer of air adjacent to that prong undergoes compression or pressure. It goes under pressure, and when the prong moves, it squeezes the air molecules together, creating compression. Or pressure. When the prong springs back from that direction, it happens really fast, by the way. When it springs back in the opposite direction, it leaves an area of reduced air pressure or relative vacuum. This is called rarefaction. So we have compression and rarefaction happening really fast. This is the compression at a higher pressure and the rarefaction at a lower pressure move in waves. And depending on the frequency of the speed and the intensity or the strength, the sequence of the waves in the air can cause sound or just wind or a little breeze. When the waves hit the eardrum with sufficient frequency and intensity, the eardrum will vibrate, and that will transmit information to the brain to analyze as sound. We're actually using this exact same principle right here and now as I'm speaking. I'm sending air through my vocal cords, and it causes my vocal cords to vibrate, little puffs and pulsations of air popping through, and it's causing high and low pressure systems going on inside my mouth and my pharynx and my teeth and so on. And those things are bouncing around in the shapes, and high overtones, low overtones are coming out of my mouth, and those vibrations are traveling through the air in all directions around me, and you just happen to be sitting in one of those directions, and your ears are picking up those vibrations, and you're hearing them and translating those vibrations into individualized sounds. Do we all hear exactly the same thing? Well, maybe not. We're all individuals. But the sound coming from me will be the same throughout to everyone. This is what's similar to what is happening in the nature of air. Air is compressed, causing it to move and leaving a void where it was before, and that area of compressed air then is filled in with other air around it, which is higher pressure. So we have decompressed air and compressed air moving constantly from one place to the other, pushing one to the other and filling in the empty spaces. And that's what causes wind, causes high and low pressure systems in our environment, causes storms, causes hurricanes, etc. Water does exactly the same thing. Water is always seeking its greatest gravity, so it's always moving down. But as it moves down, it pushes other water out of the way, and that water sometimes will rise up, and that water will then begin to look for its greatest gravity and start pushing down again. So we have water pushing against water all over the world. So therefore we have physical waves occurring as a result of high and low pressure systems. It's really just that simple, that vibration, therefore, is everywhere, and vibration is in all of life. I'll leave it there.
So what David is talking to us about that we can relate with is the idea that there are laws in the universe that create an imbalance to create and establish balance. So how does that work for us? Well, poise as balance is in equilibrium. And a person who is poised or balanced or in equilibrium is a calm, confident person. They're calm in their manner, and they're calm in their way of behaving. And we can balance evenly to the point of suspension. So I told you before, Ernest Holmes wrote, perfectly poised, it will give the impression of suspended motion. David described it in air and water, but let's look at it within ourselves. Let's look at moments where we may have felt suspended in motion and yet motionless at the same time. So for me, and I hope for you, you've experienced this, and if you haven't experienced this, I invite you to open yourself up to the idea of balance in your affirmations, to be able to feel that oneness factor so completely in a moment when you're facing something that doesn't look so good. So when we're facing a situation that appears to us to be negative, whatever that may be, I'm not going to even give any suggestions. We all know what things are on our plate or push our buttons. When we're facing that moment, there can be within us an opportunity for us to feel the oneness so completely, to feel the very presence of perfect life, that we might have said to someone, I just felt something come over me. Maybe you can relate to those words. That moment where we feel something come over us is that moment when we're in perfect balance. And for me, when I feel that, suddenly the situation totally changes. Not in the physical world, nothing changed in the physical world necessarily, but I changed. Something within me changed so completely that I surrendered to a serenity, and it feels as though time stops, and it feels like I know in a moment what timelessness feels like. And this feeling feels natural. It feels good. It feels comforting. And the reason that it does is because it is our natural state. I personally happen to believe it is our life after life, forever, eternal state. That sense of timelessness where we know that the situation will resolve. We've had plenty of situations in the past. We aren't living in them anymore, or if we are, maybe we're working to shift those. But we have that opportunity to glimpse what is possible for us to feel in a moment of time and to recognize it. So the depth of balance in our lives links with our mindfulness, our self-awareness. It's the blessing in the moment of realizing that I am supported by a universal presence that is always within me, surrounding me. It's the opportunity to know that in that moment that I don't have to make a rash decision. I can choose wisely because I am that wisdom. Our self-awareness of our highest nature and the power that lies within us is intimately exemplified when we experience a state of balance within.
And we talk a lot about balance in science of mind, particularly in terms of balancing that which is spiritual and that which is physical, and recognizing the spiritual nature of ourselves as being incorporating all of that. But at the same time, we talk a lot about balance and so on. But I think it's also really important to understand that there must be imbalance for us to experience life.
That's that negative
Yeah.
picturing.
There must be imbalance. I just talked a lot about the pressure systems and how they imbalance each other, and they work together to create different things, sound and wind and waves and whatever. All of our physical senses are receptors of extraordinary conditions. Our senses like sight, smell, hearing, taste, touch are all translated into vibrations that are then transmitted and analyzed by the brain. There would be no flow or stimulation to the senses without imbalance through vibration. There would be no connectivity between that which is a cause and effect within us, either within us or outside of us. There has to be imbalance in the world for vibration to actually even exist. Maybe what we're actually seeking then is not absolute balance, but more of a controlled equilibrium of imbalance. Do you get that? There's constantly stuff happening around us all the time. Some of the stuff we pay attention to, and some of the stuff we don't need to pay attention to. We need to pay attention to that which is important to us, that which sustains our life, and that which creates that which we wish to experience in our life. And so therefore, letting go of the rest of the imbalance that was really out of balance is important. Peace is basically a cessation of extreme conditions or unpleasant vibrations. Peace is not a cessation of conditions. Peace is not a moment in which nothing is happening. Peace is a time when things are working in equilibrium, peacefully together. Ironically, we're always seeking equilibrium, even within the realm of balance and imbalance. That sense of poise that that Deborah was talking about.
So the Bible uses the word poise to mean well balanced, as in, and you said this in your own words, the Bible says, the ability to be conscious of dominion over the condition to be destroyed in order to be calm and peaceful. Peace is an inside job. It isn't necessarily reflected on the outer, although once we feel peace, we will tend to see a lot more peace around us. So one of the tools that we use in our teaching is meditation. Meditation helps us embody a more balanced self. A Massachusetts hospital study found that not only does meditation help people feel calmer, but it produces positive changes to the brain with memory, empathy, sense of self, and stress regulation. Now, I don't know about you, but as I look around the world and in that world of teaching and education that I'm in, I see a lot of stress. And perhaps you do in some certain areas also. But are we looking deeply into those, as David said, or are we looking into the areas where we see peace? Because the more that we can create it within ourselves, the greater it will show up around us. So remember, we have a class upcoming on meditation. If you could benefit from a greater balancing act in your life, you might want to sign up. And I also wanted to let you know that Ernest Holmes has a book and an audio book. You can buy it at Barnes & Noble, you can buy it online, and it's called How to Use Your Power, 20 Practical Lessons for Creating a Balanced Life. In it, he addresses certain issues. Some of them are a happy family life, successful relationships, dealing with addictions, and greater prosperity, all relative for each of us. Every area of our life benefits by the use of balance, of using our mind to create that balance.
That's true in our spiritual nature. It's also true in our physical nature. I love this metaphor that our physical balance, our ability to stand or to walk, is accomplished through pressures within the inner ear. Fascinating, huh? We can accept that as a metaphor for listening to the voice within, inner listening. We achieve inner balance through self-awareness, listening within. Do you ever think about a pendulum? And quite often, if we're talking about balance, we really kind of have to talk about a pendulum, and a pendulum flowing from one side to the other. And sometimes it has big swings, and sometimes it has lesser swings. We quite often seem to want to find ourselves in the center of that. But sometimes life is exciting, and pendulums making huge, powerful swings in our life. And sometimes it's actually just going back and forth. The important thing, the importance is to realize that what's happening on the periphery is not really what's important. What's happening in the center, where we focus our attention, is the most important part. So the pendulum can go where it wants. It's going to go into good things and bad things and right things and wrong things and happy things and sad things and distractions and connections and so on. The pendulum is going to go wherever it wants. We stay in the center, recognize, stuff happens, and I'm focused and I'm centered and I'm balanced.
So one of the things that I thought of with this idea of poise was David when he sings. When he sings in front of people, he doesn't care if it's one person or a million people. There's a calm, assured balance within him. And so I thought, well, that's perfect because we can all relate to that. That's how we want to live. We want to live with that calm, assured confidence and balance within us, regardless of what's going on the outside. So I read an article by a psychologist, Richard Almiral. I didn't look up who he was or anything, but I liked his thoughts, so I thought I would share it with you. He says, how do we balance our thoughts? And he gives us a a little tool to use. And he says to get a more balanced perspective on any situation, write down your thoughts and then ask yourself a series of questions that force you to look at things more rationally and more logically. And as soon as I read those words, I was sold. I was like, yeah, I'm sharing this because that is Ernest Holmes. And at the end of life, he said, I hope I wasn't so rational and logical that people won't get the heart part of it. Well, we know at this center, yeah, we know at this center, we've got the heart part of it. We want to make sure that we do use our rational, logical thoughts. So the example he gives is specific to if you find yourself worrying about the future. And so he says, first write down the event and then ask yourself what evidence you have to support your thoughts. First question he says to ask yourself is, how likely is this scenario to happen? Second, is your thought a fact or an opinion? That one really got me. I was like, oh, most of the things I put my imagination about the future are my own opinions, maybe from previous experiences. So, zip, gone. Number 3, whether you have proof of a disastrous outcome. Maybe you are aware and have enough evidence to believe something's going to happen and you're nervous and stressing over it, but do you know it's going to have a negative outcome? And if not, why waste that time?
I was throw something in here because I was just
Go
thinking
right
about
ahead.
something I read on Facebook this week was a woman was saying, of course I live in the past. Have you seen the future? Have you seen the present lately? Of course I live in the past. Have you seen the present lately?
You told me last night. I laughed harder then.
Yeah.
The
I
fourth,
said it right.
yes, you did. The fourth one is, how much will this matter to me in a week or a month or a year? If it's not going to matter that much, then do we really want to make our bodies sick with worry over something that may or may not even happen? So I believe that sometimes we get knocked off balance by thoughts that occur because of our emotional response to the original thought rather than any actual evidence or the use of our logical, rational mind. Harvard Medical School put out an article that suggests another opportunity for us, and that's Tai Chi. Tai Chi is quiet, slow motion movements that align our body and our mind. And I have practiced Tai Chi, and it is a fabulous tool to use.
So we have a lot of tools to work on balancing techniques, and no matter of how we feel and how we express things into the world. Here's another example. When Albert Einstein met Charlie Chaplin in 1931, Einstein said, "What I admire most about your art is its universality. You do not say a word, and yet the world understands you." Chaplin replied, "It's true, but your fame is even greater. The world admires you when no one understands you." I love quotes like that. Here's another quote that I liked. Jimi Hendrix, in terms of speaking about balancing priorities, Jimi Hendrix says, "When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace." You can be the starting point of that. There's a change happening in the world, and I'm on the change team. So be a part of that which is happening, balancing, creating the balance in the world. And it doesn't have to be as profound as creating world peace. It can be simply as this quote: "A balanced diet is an ice cream cone in each hand." I like that.
For some of us. For some of us. So in conclusion, I'm going to share 7 tips from Deepak Chopra. I know we haven't talked about him for quite a long time, but we used to quite a bit. And I'm going to tell you first that he's talking about the balance of mind and body. And I'm going to tell you also that there's nothing new here. You already know these things. And I know you know how to implement them. And so the only question is, are you doing it? And if not, Are you ready to do it? So here are the 7. Meditate, eat a healthy diet, exercise, get restful sleep, release emotional toxins, cultivate loving relationships, and belly laugh at least once a day. David and I decided that belly laugh one was the one we were going to practice on some more.
Because we need it.
Well, we actually wondered. We had a belly laugh, wondering if we could lose our bellies if we did practice that. We're telling you way too much today. But the truth is,
Gonna balance that
my
out.
beautiful friends, we are inseparable parts of an infinite intelligence. And with each and every breath that we take, we exchange millions of atoms with the universe. We are intended to experience optimal balance and well-being. So go forth and